The Ashford family's annual gala was in full swing when my cousin Damien cornered me by the champagne fountain. I was wearing a simple black dress from a department store, deliberately modest among the designer gowns. "Cousin Isabel." Damien's voice carried across the ballroom. "A moment, please." The crowd quieted, sensing entertainment. Damien pulled an envelope from his jacket with theatrical flair. "On behalf of the family, we wanted to help you. This should cover a proper dress for next year's event. Something that won't embarrass the Ashford name." He handed me a check for $500. The crowd tittered. Some actually laughed. I looked at the check, then at Damien's smug face. 20 years. 20 years of this treatment. 20 years of being the poor relation, the charity case, the family embarrassment. Something inside me shattered. But instead of breaking down, I smiled. Softly. Genuinely. "Keep it," I said, my voice steady. "You'll need it more than I will." The smile on Damien's face faltered. "What?" "You'll understand soon enough." I set the check on the table and walked away, leaving confusion in my wake. My apartment was small and unremarkable, exactly as I'd designed it to be. Third floor of a modest building, minimal furniture, nothing that suggested wealth. I poured myself a glass of wine and sat at my desk. Then I opened my laptop and logged into a secure server. The screen came alive with data, charts, portfolios, real-time updates. The dashboard of Sphinx Enterprises, my multi-billion-dollar empire. I'd built it from nothing over 15 years, always in the shadows, always anonymous. The Ashford family thought I worked as a mid-level accountant at a small firm. They had no idea I owned that firm. And 17 others. My finger hovered over the phone. Then I called. "Hello, Isabel." Foster's voice was warm. He'd been my CFO for 8 years. "The vacation is over, Foster," I said. "It's time for phase 1. "Are you sure?" "Once we begin." "I've never been more sure of anything in my life. Let's show the Ashfords what happens when you underestimate someone for 20 years. Phase 1 began quietly. Through one of Sphinx's many shell companies, I made a strategic investment in a small tech startup called Nanotech Solutions. On the surface, it looked like standard venture capital. But Nanotech Solutions was special. They manufactured a specific microchip that the Ashford family's electronics company, Ashford Industries, relied on exclusively. Without those chips, their entire production line would halt. The investment gave me controlling interest. And the CEO of Nanotech was someone I'd quietly mentored for years. He'd do exactly what I asked. Damien, now acting CEO of Ashford Industries, received the notification of the investment at his desk. I heard about his reaction through my network of informants. "Anonymous investor?" he'd said to his assistant. "Probably Chinese money trying to break into American markets. Nothing to worry about." He had no idea that the anonymous investor had grown up in the same house as him. That she'd watched him inherit everything while she got nothing. That she'd spent 2 decades planning this moment. Phase 2 was more aggressive. The Ashford family's lifestyle, the mansions, the cars, the private jets, was funded by debt. Massive, sprawling debt across multiple lenders. They lived like royalty while barely staying solvent. Over the next month, operating through various shell companies and investment vehicles, I quietly bought up their debt. All of it. Every mortgage, every line of credit, every business loan. I consolidated it under Sphinx Enterprises' control. Foster met me at a private office to review the portfolio. "Isabel, if we call in these notes, they will be utterly destroyed. The family will lose everything." I looked at the numbers on the screen. $50 million in debt. Now mine to collect whenever I chose. "I know," I said simply. Foster nodded. He'd heard enough of my stories over the years to understand why this mattered. "When do we move?" "Not yet. Let them feel secure first. Let them think they're untouchable." I smiled. The fall is always harder when you don't see it coming. My Aunt Constance, the family matriarch, visited my apartment 3 days later. She didn't call first. Just showed up at my door like I should be honored by her presence. "The scene you caused at the gala was unacceptable," she said, not even greeting me first. "Damien was trying to help you." "By humiliating me in front of 200 people?" by offering you charity you desperately need. She looked around my small apartment with barely concealed disgust. Look at how you live, Isabel. You should be grateful that the family even acknowledges you. Why wouldn't they? I'm Ashford too. Barely. Your mother married that dreadful man, that artist with no prospects. She threw away her place in this family for romance. Died poor and foolish just like him. She leaned forward. You're just like her. A dreamer with no grasp of reality. The family tolerates you out of pity, nothing more. After she left, I sat in silence for a long time. Then I called Foster. Move up the timeline, I said. I'm tired of waiting. My cousin Felicity, perhaps the most vicious of the family, called me a week later with a proposition. Isabel, darling, I've found the perfect man for you. Her voice dripped with false sweetness. His name is Harrison. He's a member of my country club. Very nice, very simple. I think you two would be perfect together. She was trying to marry me off. Get rid of the embarrassing poor relation by pawning me off on someone equally low in society. I'd love to meet him, I said, playing along. The date was arranged for the following Saturday. Harrison was handsome, charming, and too perfect. He asked all the right questions, expressed all the right concerns about my situation. By dessert, I was certain. How much is Felicity paying you? I asked. Harrison's smooth expression cracked. Excuse me. She hired you to date me, didn't she? Probably promised a bonus if you could get me to leave town with you. He recovered quickly. I don't know what you're talking about. But his story was obvious. The slight twitch of his left eye. I'd seen it twice during dinner when he lied about his background. It's okay, I said. I have a counteroffer. Harrison met me at a coffee shop the next day. I'll pay you triple whatever Felicity offered, I said. All you have to do is feed her false information about me. Tell her I'm desperate, pathetic, exactly what she wants to hear. Why would you want that? Because she'll get comfortable. She'll let her guard down. And I need her distracted for what's coming next. Harrison studied me carefully. He wasn't stupid. There's something you're not telling me about who you really are. Yes. And if you're smart, you won't ask questions. You'll take the money, play your part, and stay out of the blast radius. He thought for exactly 10 seconds. How much are we talking about? I named a figure that made his eyes widen. That's more than Felicity's entire trust fund. I know. I slid a contract across the table. Do we have a deal? He signed. I had my first inside informant in the family's inner circle. The game was accelerating. 2 weeks later, Nanotech Solutions made an announcement. They were terminating their exclusive supply contract with Ashford Industries, citing ethical concerns about business practices. It was perfectly legal. I'd made sure of that. The contract had a moral turpitude clause that Nanotech could invoke if they felt the client's behavior violated their company values. The Ashford family's notorious treatment of employees and suppliers was well documented. The announcement hit Damien like a bomb. Without those chips, Ashford Industries couldn't manufacture their flagship product. Their production line ground to a halt. 3 factories went idle. Millions of dollars in losses per day. I watched the stock price fall from my apartment, sipping coffee and feeling nothing but cold satisfaction. Damien called an emergency board meeting. He assured them he'd find a replacement supplier. But every other manufacturer was either already contracted elsewhere or couldn't meet Ashford's volume needs. He was trapped. And he didn't even know who'd trapped him. Desperate to cover the mounting losses, Damien sought emergency financing. The banks he usually worked with were suddenly reassessing their risk exposure to Ashford Industries. Every traditional lender turned him down. Then an offer came from Blackwood Capital, a private equity firm known for aggressive terms and hostile takeovers. They offered Damien exactly what he needed. $75 million. The catch. The entire Ashford family fortune was required as collateral. Every asset. The house, the art collection, the cars, the business itself. If Ashford Industries defaulted, Blackwood Capital could seize everything. Damien had no choice. He signed. What he didn't know was that Blackwood Capital was another Sphinx shell company. I now held not just the family's debt, but a legal claim to everything they owned. Foster called me after the papers were signed. He walked right into it. Of course he did, I said. Desperation makes people stupid. And Damien has been stupid his entire life. This is just the first time it'll cost him everything. The family's chauffeur, Edmund, had worked for the Ashfords for 30 years. He'd driven me to school as a child, before my parents died, and the family stopped pretending I mattered. Edmund found me at a coffee shop one morning. He looked nervous. "Miss Isabel, I need to show you something." He handed me a leather ledger, old and worn. "I found this in the garage behind some boxes. I think Mr. Damien was hiding it." Inside were financial records from 15 years ago, when I was 17 and my parents had just died. The Ashfords had been appointed guardians of my trust fund, a modest inheritance from my father's family. The ledger showed systematic withdrawals, money that should have paid for my college education, money that should have been mine. Damien had stolen it, every penny. Used it to fund his lifestyle while telling me the trust fund had been mismanaged and lost. "Why are you showing me this?" I asked Edmund. He looked at me with kind, tired eyes. "Because in 30 years, you're the only one who ever treated me like a person. They treat me like furniture. You deserve to know what they did to you." 3 weeks after the production line shut down, Damien called a family meeting. I received the summons with everyone else. A curt text. "Family dinner. Sunday. Your presence is required." I went, wearing another cheap dress, playing my role. The dining room was tense. Felicity was there with her husband. Aunt Constance presided at the head of the table. Damien stood and cleared his throat. "We're facing a temporary business challenge. Nothing we can't handle. But in times like these, families must support each other." He looked directly at me. "Isabel, I've arranged a marriage for you. His name is Klaus Werner. He's a German businessman, quite successful. The alliance would be beneficial for the family's international prospects." Aunt Constance nodded approvingly. "It's time you contributed something useful, Isabel. This is your duty to the family." Klaus was 60 years old. I'd looked him up the moment I heard the name. He was under investigation by multiple European authorities for fraud and money laundering. They were trying to marry me off to a criminal. "When do I meet him?" I asked quietly. Damien smiled. "Next week. I've already accepted on your behalf." I had Klaus investigated properly. My security team was thorough. Within 3 days, I had a complete dossier. Klaus Werner was in serious trouble. The FBI was building a case against him for his American operations. Multiple charges. If convicted, he'd spend decades in prison. The Ashfords knew this, or at least suspected it. That's why they were using me. If the marriage went through, I'd be legally connected to his crimes. When Klaus went down, I'd likely be charged as a conspirator. They were throwing me to the wolves to protect themselves from investigation. It was the ultimate betrayal. But it was also an opportunity. I made contact with the FBI agent heading the Klaus investigation. Agent Rodriguez was surprised to hear from me. "You're engaged to Werner?" "The engagement hasn't been announced yet. But yes, I want to help you build your case." "Why would you do that?" "Because the people pushing this marriage are using me as a shield. I'd like to return the favor." The engagement party was held at the Ashford mansion. 200 guests, champagne and orchestra. Klaus stood beside me, old and leering, his hand possessively on my waist. I wore a wire. Agent Rodriguez and her team were parked 2 blocks away, listening to everything. Damien raised his glass for a toast. "To my dear cousin Isabel, finally being useful to the family." The crowd laughed. I smiled and squeezed Klaus's hand. "Darling, tell me again about the business arrangement with Damien." Klaus, drunk on expensive wine and his own ego, started talking. About the money he'd moved through Ashford Industries. About the accounts he'd use. About how Damien would get a percentage for facilitating everything. Every word was recorded. Every confession was documented. Agent Rodriguez gave me the signal through my earpiece. "We're moving in." FBI agents swarmed the mansion. Klaus was arrested at his own engagement party. As they handcuffed him, he screamed at Damien. "You set me up. This was supposed to be safe. Damien went pale as the agent started asking him questions. Damien was taken in for questioning. The scandal exploded across social media within hours. Ashford Air involved an international money laundering scheme. The company's stock plummeted. Business partners distanced themselves. The board called an emergency meeting. Aunt Constance tried to control the narrative, but it was too late. The damage was catastrophic. 3 days later, Blackwood Capital sent a formal notice. The loan terms had been triggered. Due to the material adverse change in Ashford Industries' business prospects, full repayment was demanded immediately. $75 million. Due in 30 days. Damien called another emergency board meeting. They didn't have the cash. The company's assets were leveraged. The family's personal wealth was tied up in real estate and art that couldn't be liquidated quickly. He needed a miracle. That's when the patron made an offer. The offer came through official channels. A mysterious investor known only as the patron proposed a merger. Sphinx Enterprises would acquire 49% of Ashford Industries for $50 million. It would save the company. It required a board vote. But given the circumstances, Damien had no choice. Who is this patron? Felicity demanded during a family meeting I attended. No one knows, Damien said. But they're legitimate. Foster Capital has verified their finances. They have the money. And we lose control of the company? We keep 51%. Maintain majority control. It's our only option. Aunt Constance looked troubled. Something about this feels orchestrated. Damien ignored her. He was desperate. He scheduled the board vote for the following Monday. What he didn't know was that I'd been quietly buying shares of Ashford Industries for years. Through various shell companies, different names, carefully hidden transactions. I already controlled 30% of the company. When combined with the Sphinx acquisition, I'd have 79%. Total control. While Damien prepared for his salvation, Felicity tried to save herself. She went to the press with a fabricated story. My cousin Isabel is an unstable woman who was manipulated by Klaus Werner. She's mentally fragile and has always been jealous of the family's success. This whole situation is her fault. The story went viral. Social media tore me apart. I was called a gold digger, a fool, a disturbed woman who'd brought shame to her family. My face was plastered across tabloid websites. For 48 hours, I was the most hated woman on the internet. I didn't deny any of it. I stayed silent. Let them think about what they wanted. But I did give one interview. Anonymous, to the Wall Street Journal, about Sphinx Enterprises and its mysterious founder. I talked about building a business from nothing. About the philosophy of patience and strategy. About how real power came from being underestimated. The article went viral for different reasons. People were fascinated by the patron, this mysterious figure reshaping corporate America. Suddenly, Felicity's narrative seemed petty and small. The board meeting was scheduled for Monday at 10 a.m. I arrived at Ashford Industries headquarters at 9:30, dressed in a tailored suit I'd had custom made years ago but never worn. My hair was professionally styled. I wore my mother's pearl earrings, the only inheritance the family hadn't stolen. Foster walked beside me, carrying a briefcase. The receptionist looked confused. Miss Ashford? There's no meeting. There absolutely is, I said, walking past her to the elevator. We rode to the top floor. The boardroom was full. Damien sat at the head of the table, confident and relaxed. The board members were reviewing documents. Then the doors opened and I walked in. The room went silent. Damien's face went from confusion to shock to dawning horror in 3 seconds. What is she doing here? Felicity demanded. I walked to the head of the table. Hello, Damien, I said calmly. I am the patron. And this is my company now. Foster opened his briefcase and distributed folders to each board member. Inside were share certificates, all traced back to me through various entities. As you can see, I said, I currently control 30% of Ashford Industries stock. With the Sphinx acquisition of 49%, I'll own 79%. I am now the majority shareholder. Damien stood up. This is fraud. She's been hiding assets. I've been investing wisely, I corrected. Nothing illegal about it. You never asked where I got my money. You just assumed I had none. I nodded to Foster. He played an audio recording. Damien's voice filled the room. To my dear cousin Isabel, finally being useful to the family. His toast from the engagement party. The board members shifted uncomfortably. You humiliated me for sport, I said. All of you. For 20 years, you treated me like garbage. Made me a family joke. The charity case. I smiled. Now let's discuss what happens next. I laid out my terms. I'm calling in all the family's debt. Immediately. The mortgages, the credit lines, everything. It's all due today. Aunt Constance gasped. You can't do that. I absolutely can. I bought it all. And according to the terms you signed, I can demand immediate repayment at my discretion. Damien's face was white. We don't have that kind of liquid capital. I know. I turned to Foster. Show them the second part. He pulled out Edmund's ledger. The proof of Damien's theft from my trust fund. This shows systematic embezzlement of funds from a minor. That's a federal crime, Damien. I could have you arrested right now. I let that sink in. But I'm going to give you a choice. Sign over all personal assets to settle the debt, and I won't press charges. Fight me, and I'll see you in prison. The board members were staring at Damien with a mixture of shock and disgust. They'd suspected he was corrupt, but seeing the proof was different. You're insane, Felicity hissed. No, I said. I'm just finally telling the truth. Security escorted Damien and Felicity from the building. They screamed threats and accusations, but it didn't matter. The board had voted. Unanimously. I was now CEO of Ashford Industries. Within a week, the company was mine completely. I restructured it, brought in new management, cleared out the corruption that had festered for decades. The Ashford family fortune was liquidated to pay the debt they owed me. The mansion was sold. The art collection was auctioned. The cars, the jewelry, the vacation homes. Everything. $50 million was transferred to Sphinx Enterprises. It barely made a dent in my net worth, but it wasn't about the money. It was about justice. The public watched the fall with fascination. The mighty Ashford family, brought down by the cousin they'd mocked for years. Business journalists wrote think pieces about corporate karma. I declined all interview requests. Let them wonder. Damien was arrested 3 weeks later. The FBI had finished their investigation into the Klaus Werner case. Evidence showed Damien had knowingly participated in the money laundering scheme. He was charged with multiple counts of fraud and embezzlement. The trial would be lengthy. He'd likely spend years in prison. I didn't attend the court proceedings. I had no need to see him humiliated further. The revenge wasn't about watching them suffer. It was about reclaiming what they'd stolen. My dignity, my inheritance, my place in the world. Felicity tried to maintain her lifestyle, but her trust fund was frozen as part of the debt settlement. Her husband divorced her within a month. She lost her membership at the country club, her friends, her social standing. Everything she'd valued was gone. And it was all perfectly legal. I'd used their own weapons against them. Debt, contracts, the legal system they'd always manipulated to their advantage. 6 months after the boardroom confrontation, Aunt Constance came to my new office. She looked smaller than I remembered. Older. Broken. May I sit? She asked, her voice lacking its usual imperious tone. I gestured to a chair. She sat carefully, like she was afraid the furniture might break. You've won, she said simply. Yes. I came to apologize. I waited. I was cruel to you. We all were. We treated you terribly for reasons that had nothing to do with you, and everything to do with our own insecurity. She looked at her hands. Your mother was the best of us. Kind, creative, full of life. We resented her for choosing love over status. And when she died, we took that resentment out on you. Is that supposed to make it better? No. Nothing can make it better. I just wanted you to know that I finally understand what we did. And I'm sorry. I didn't give them their money back. That wasn't how justice worked. But I didn't leave them destitute either. Through a series of trusts, I set up modest living allowances for Aunt Constance and the other family members. Enough to live comfortably in middle-class circumstances. Enough to survive. Not enough to return to their old lives of luxury and arrogance. You'll receive $40,000 per year, I told Aunt Constance. Adjusted for inflation. It's managed by an independent trustee, so you can't access the principal. That's generous, she said quietly. It's more than you deserve. But I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing it because I'm breaking the cycle of cruelty that's run through this family for generations. I stood. You'll be comfortable, Aunt Constance. But you're no longer an Ashford. None of you are. I'm the only one left who carries that name. And I'm going to restore its meaning. I liquidated Ashford Industries completely. The company was bloated, corrupt, built on exploitation and cut corners. It couldn't be saved, and I didn't want to save it. Instead, I used the capital to find something new. The Sphinx Foundation. Its mission was simple. Fund young people from disadvantaged backgrounds who had entrepreneurial dreams. Give them seed capital, mentorship, and support. Help them build something from nothing, the way I had. The foundation's first act was offering Edmund a position on the board. Me. He looked stunned. You showed me the ledger. You gave me the evidence I needed. You believed in justice when no one else did. I smiled. Besides, you know better than anyone how to spot people who need a chance. You watched the family ignore me for 20 years. Edmund accepted. He became one of the foundation's most valuable members, his judgment of character proving invaluable. We funded 17 companies in the first year alone. 1 year after the confrontation, I stood on a stage at a business conference, giving a keynote speech. The room held 3,000 people. Entrepreneurs, investors, journalists. They all knew the story now. The Wall Street Journal had published a full profile 6 months earlier, revealing my identity as the patron. Building a business from nothing requires more than capital, I said. It requires patience, vision, the ability to be underestimated and use that to your advantage. I talked about my strategy, how I'd hidden my success for years while quietly building power, how the family's dismissal of me had been my greatest advantage. They never suspected me because they never saw me. I was invisible. And invisibility is the ultimate strategic position. After the speech, during the Q&A, a reporter raised her hand. Do you ever miss your family? The question everyone wanted to ask but few dared to. I smiled. I miss the family I should have had. But not the one I got. Felicity tried one last desperate move. 18 months after losing everything, she filed a lawsuit against me. The claim was absurd. Undue influence. She argued that I'd manipulated the family, that my actions constituted fraud, that the transfers weren't legal. Her lawyer was a hack who'd taken the case on contingency, probably hoping for a quick settlement. My legal team dismantled the case in 15 minutes at the preliminary hearing. The judge looked at Felicity with barely concealed contempt. Ms. Ashford, your cousin used legal means to acquire debt and exercise her rights as a creditor. Nothing in her actions constitutes fraud. This case is dismissed. Then came the final humiliation. Furthermore, you will pay Ms. Isabel Ashford's legal fees. $52,000. Felicity left the courthouse in tears. I never saw her again. I'd heard she moved to a small town upstate, working a retail job, living in a studio apartment. The fall from grace was complete. The Sphinx Foundation Gala was held in a beautiful hall downtown. 200 guests, but they were different from the Ashford family galas. These were the foundation's scholars, their families, the mentors and supporters who believed in giving others a chance. I stood at the podium to make an announcement. The Sphinx Foundation will continue long after I'm gone. I'm establishing an endowment that will fund it in perpetuity. Applause filled the room. But I want to be clear about something. I will not be passing leadership of Sphinx Enterprises to any blood relation. The CEO position will be earned, not inherited. It will go to the most promising candidate from our foundation's programs. I looked at the faces in the crowd. Young people who reminded me of myself at their age. Hungry, driven. Dismissed by those who should have supported them. My legacy will not be a name. It will be an opportunity. For anyone willing to work for it. I live in a beautiful penthouse now, high above the city. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlook the skyline. Minimalist design, carefully chosen art. The space reflected who I'd become. Powerful but not ostentatious, successful but not wasteful. I sat by the window one evening, watching the city lights, and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not satisfaction or triumph or vindication. Just peace. The revenge was complete. The family was broken. Justice had been served. But more than that, I'd built something good from their cruelty. The foundation was thriving. Young entrepreneurs were succeeding. Lives were changing. My phone buzzed with a message from Foster. The first class of Sphinx scholars has graduated. All 17 companies are still operational. 12 are profitable. I smiled and texted back. Schedule a celebration dinner. We've earned it. 20 years of pain had led to this moment. And it was finally completely worth it. I never sought contact with the family again. They'd scattered to different cities, different lives. Aunt Constance had moved to Florida. Damien was in prison. Felicity had disappeared into obscurity. Sometimes I'd hear updates through mutual acquaintances. Aunt Constance volunteering at a library. Felicity works as a cashier. Normal lives. Humble lives. The lives they'd once mocked others for living. I felt no pity and no glee. Just a distant acknowledgement that justice had been served. They'd spent 20 years telling me I was nothing. That I'd never amount to anything. That I should be grateful for their scraps. It had taken losing everything for them to realize the truth. Not about me. About themselves. They were the ones with nothing. No integrity, no honor, no genuine relationships. They'd built their lives on status and cruelty. And when those things were taken away, they had nothing left. I'd built my life on resilience and strategy. And those things couldn't be taken from me. 5 years after the confrontation, I stood on a terrace in Barcelona. The Mediterranean stretched before me, endless and blue. Foster had retired, and his replacement, a brilliant young woman named Anika, had just sent me the quarterly reports. The foundation had funded over 200 companies. Sphinx Enterprises was valued at $8 billion. I was regularly listed among the world's most influential business leaders. But none of that mattered as much as the message I'd received that morning. From Edmund, now in his 70s and still serving on the foundation's board. Another scholarship class selected. 23 recipients. All brilliant. All underestimated by their families. All reminded me of you. I smiled, looking out at the sea. The Ashfords had spent 2 decades trying to make me feel small. Trying to convince me I was nothing. They'd been my greatest teachers. They'd shown me exactly who I didn't want to be. And in doing so, they'd given me the fuel to become something they could never understand. Not their equal. Their superior. And I'd done it by being everything they weren't. Patient, strategic, compassionate. I raised my glass to the sunset. They spent 20 years telling me I was nothing. I said aloud to no one. It took losing everything for them to realize. They were right about themselves. If you enjoyed this revenge story, don't forget to like and subscribe to this channel for more.